Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Yasin Mammeri. Yasin is a content creator with almost 1 million followers across platforms, and he's the founder of Viral Video Club. Viral Video Club is a business that helps creators grow. It offers one-on-one coaching, it has boot camps, and it has a community. In our conversation, we talk about how Yasin went from being homeless to running a successful business. We talk about his view on content and how he pushes himself to do more, learn more, and just be better. And we talk about how important the community aspect is to him and why he started in the first place. It's a very interesting conversation. We cover a lot of ground here, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. Enjoy the show. Hey Yasin, thanks for joining me today. I've learned a lot from your content, so I'm excited to get into it. To kick us off, could you explain what Viral Video Club is and how it works?
Sure. So maybe some context first. Mr. Beast, I heard on a podcast a few years ago, grew so fast because he joined a mastermind with a bunch of other degenerates. They all had around 10,000 followers. And after a year of meeting every day, all day, and trying to crack the code on YouTube growth, they all had 1 million followers within a year. And when I heard that, and I'd been trying to grow on social, I was like, okay, this is the missing piece. It made a lot of sense to me because that is how learning takes place. This is what schools would have been back in the day. Having peers to go back and forth on in terms of what's working and whatnot increases the speed of learning, right? It compounds it in a way that when we're isolated, as most creators are, they're just tinkering away, trying to figure it out themselves. It's just a slower process, and they don't see everything. This is why scientists work together and startup growth marketing teams, there's multiple people from different disciplines all working together to crack the code on growth. And yet somehow, some way we treat social growth different. I don't think it is actually different. I think you don't need to be a lone wolf, and you shouldn't be. And the best creative teams work in teams, like Pixar, for instance, has a team, has a process. And it's only through the collaboration do they actually reach things like Toy Story. So it's it blossomed out of that, and actually it started as a very selfish mastermind so I could grow. It wasn't a paid thing. It was me working with a bunch of other creators, just 4 or 5 of us, and we'd meet every week. And as soon as I'd plateaued on TikTok at the time, as soon as I started the mastermind, my growth ticked up. I got 30K followers the next month. And so I went, holy fuck, can I swear on this?
Yeah, sure.
I was like, holy fuck, this shit works. And then I pivoted my whole business from a marketing agency, copywriting agency, to social growth in the community. That's how much I believed in it. And this was despite 3 8-figure, 9-figure entrepreneurs saying you're an idiot, the agency's working, keep doing that. So I ignored all of them. That was really actually emotionally very hard because it made a lot of sense to me, and to hear people that I looked up to and respected saying this is an idiotic idea was, it really made me doubt myself, and also depressed because I hated the agency and it made it feel like that was my only choice. So I started it. It was brutally hard at the start. Brutally hard. A community with no members is pretty shit. So it's kind of that the 0 to 1, the same as on social. It's harder to get your first 1,000 followers than it is to get your last 10,000 or 1 million or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's a community that brings different creators from all walks of life, businesses, niches, ways of philosophies. It brings them all together, this wonderful mixing pot where they can share their ideas, share what's learning, and give feedback to each other, which is the critical piece that's missing with like, there's so many courses you can take online about everything, and social growth is like inundated with these courses. And sure, that like I take some of these courses, I get like a nugget or two, but in one piece of feedback from the community, I will get more nuggets than in any course I've taken. That's like guaranteed, because it's specific, right? It's like, you don't take an online course about how to play basketball. Like that's insane. You go to a coach and he will, or she will specifically say, oh, actually your hand is like tilted a bit too far back, and you don't use your knees to jump, and so you're not getting enough like energy into the ball, whatever. Like it's that specific feedback that allows us to speed up the process of growth. What I didn't realize the community was that it actually is, and I only recently, maybe in the last month or two, realized this, is it's also a support network. So like, I think in general, especially people who are more on the creator side than the business side, they tend to be quite sensitive people. I think creative people, they have a sensitivity about them, right? Like that's how they're so receptive to these like original ideas, is because they have heightened senses. And that's good in that it allows them to access and see these things that like ordinary people just don't see. But it also means that they feel more pain and worry and anxiety and doubt and all of this stuff. And so this stuff kept coming up in the community at the start, and I would keep answering it in a technical way, like, stop being emotional, like just, tweak this, adjust that. And they like, it just kept coming up, and I kept hitting this brick wall until I started to see how the creators in the community were interacting without me, and realized that like mindset is the biggest part of social growth, especially if you're just a sole creator. Like the mindset has to be right. And I've seen people who, like, I did a boot camp. One of the guys came in and he was growing incredibly fast when he came in. And I think he gained 80K followers on Instagram from nothing in a month. And then he continued that growth at the start. First month, great. Second month, great. And then it was half of this, toward the end of the second month, it just like stopped. And it was because his mindset got fucked. Like he's a young guy, he's 20, and he started getting desperate for views and started doing like really unusual things in his videos. And I was in the DMs like, please do not do this. And I care about the dude, so I was saying it for him. And I also he would have been an amazing testimonial, so I was also like, hey, like, you're fucking with my testimonial here. Anyway, so he plateaued and then started losing followers toward the end of the boot camp. I kept chatting to him and trying to coach him through it after the boot camp. And in the last 2 weeks, he's gained like 150,000 followers, something like that. And it took months to get his mindset right. And once his mindset was right, everything clicked. And if you don't have that, the technical stuff doesn't matter. The hacks and the tricks and the storytelling techniques and all of this stuff, it just doesn't matter. And I know that sounds woo-woo, but I've just seen it so much because one, you're going to fail an awful lot as a creator, like publicly fail, videos will flop, and that's painful. And in order to continue to put out stuff despite failing, you have to have a rock solid mindset. And this only happens, or the easiest way for this to happen is through community, through a support network. It doesn't have to be mine, but finding somewhere with people that can relate. Because back in the day, my support network was my partner, and I'd be like, oh my God, my video flopped. And she'd go, so what, bro? So she doesn't understand the pain. You need someone who has the empathy. And I think that's what community unlocks, right? Like ultimately, and I didn't see this at the start, the superpower of community is that it connects you with other people. And this is what social media was supposed to be about in the first place. But there's something really special about community. It's at our core. It's at the core of what humans are. And so it's like a blended, it's a place where you can get support, but also the technical stuff that once you have your mindset right will allow you to grow faster than you could alone. Because the other aspect of social content is that you can't see the forest for the trees, right? So you're so close to what's happening that you think your shit's amazing, and everyone else is like, actually the sound was too loud, editing was whack, actually the idea was just boring. Like, being honest, it was a boring idea. And you need these outside perspectives, and community, as I see it, is a way to bring voices to the voiceless, in terms of like, no one is giving you that sort of like critical feedback on your videos publicly, right? They'll just say, hey, your hair's shit, but they won't say like, oh, if you tweaked this, I think it would perform better. Or like, I think the hook was this, not this. So it gives a voice to your viewers, and that data is like absolutely critical. So that's kind of what the community is about.
Amazing. And you mentioned like the importance of community, and people on the same wavelength can really help scale what you do. But why take the initiative to start your own mastermind and not just join another one?
I just didn't see any. Like, I mean, I could have looked more proactively, but I just didn't see any from creators that I would want to work with. And there were people around me at a similar size to me who I liked, and so it made sense to do that instead. And I had a real hunger for social growth, and so I think, like, as I said before, you don't need to join my community. You don't need to join anyone's community. Same with like a run club. Like, you can start your own run club. It just depends on how hungry you are for it, and whether or not you're willing to be the leader. Because every community and every run club and every basketball club and like whatever it is needs a leader, or it falls apart, basically. So you can go do it yourself. You just have to put in significantly more hours to rally the troops than everyone else does. And I had the time, I had the hunger, and I couldn't see any other option out there that made sense to me.
Right. That makes sense. And from my understanding, you don't just let anyone into your community. You have to apply. Is that right?
Yeah, this is something we started, I think, around the start of April. So we went from 100% acceptance rate, like just pay and you're in, to just under a 5% acceptance rate. So you can imagine what that does to the revenue, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely a stressful thing in the moment. And this is something I don't think people talk a lot about with business, but is really important, is that sometimes you just have to stay the course, and you have to do the thing that most other people are scared of doing. And it's not always easy. And the best decision isn't always the one that feels the best, like, it's the same as like, it's more comfortable to sit on the couch, but like going for the run is going to give you a better outcome long term. So for the first while, it did not feel good to introduce the application process. And so the two main things that we were filtering for were, you had to have at least 10,000 followers, and you had to be someone who seemed cool. And I don't mean cool in the traditional way. You didn't have to be like, like suave or something. Like, I mean more like, you're like a warm, generous, compassionate, ambitious human, that like wasn't just looking to take or or to sell your wares, but rather to connect with other people, to get help for sure, but also to help others and to find community. So we were looking for that. And then there's some other things around like language. It just makes more sense if everyone speaks English, and a lot of creators, their content's in another language. And we tried it for a bit, but the level of feedback we could give was just not as good. And then we tried like, okay, translate it with ChatGPT, but ChatGPT, it like the scripts are just kind of shit, and then we'd be going, oh, the script's a little shit. We wouldn't say it like that. We were much more gentle, but the script's a little shit. And they go, well, I didn't say it like that. And then, it's like, so that, and then a few other things. But yeah, so 5% acceptance rate. And the reason for that is that we're trying to build the Harvard of social growth. We want to bring the best creators in the world together and to give them the best education in the world and allow them access to other exceptional creators, and then teach them like they can not be taught anywhere else, but also give them the support that they cannot get anywhere else. And it has to be exclusive in order for that to be a draw for amazing creators. And over time, the hope is that exclusivity becomes like sexy, and this actually for the first time happened like last week, where someone put up in their stories like, oh my god, I just got accepted to VVC. So it's like that first little signal that we're moving in the right direction of like people are getting excited to actually be accepted. And yeah, just required me and the team like staying the course and trusting that was the right thing to do, even though revenue dipped significantly.
Yeah. And speaking of revenue, like you publicly share how much you make from the community and things like that. So just to give people a better understanding of like the potential of a well-run community, even though you're now only accepting 5% of people, like how much does it bring in?
I'll just give some context here. Like the community is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like I've worked for fast-growing startups. I've built other products and services within VVC. All the other products and services bring in significantly more money than the community. And probably on paper, I should just focus on my course, my bootcamp, my one-to-one stuff. But I just have a deep love for the community, so I keep coming back to it. We had quite a good week in terms of sales, so we've bumped up quite a bit. I'd say it's probably sitting at around $10,000 right now, which, given the size of my audience, is pretty shit, to be honest. But yeah, it makes me by far the least amount of money of all of the other things I do, but it brings me by far the most joy, and it's the thing that I think about the most, focus on the most. And I think if I can nail it, then it's the path to the biggest company that we can possibly build. I don't think it's going to be through some, just another social growth course or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what made you decide to start making content in the first place?
I've always loved content. I always loved YouTube. I always wanted to be a content creator. Back in the day, I was a musician, so I used to post like music content, and my ex-girlfriend was an artist, and I helped grow her account. And then I had success with that, more with her account than mine. But then I started helping friends, and I just really enjoyed the number game, of like, oh, if I do this, the number goes up. And then I did that for GoDaddy, for small businesses. And then I kind of pivoted slightly into growth marketing. So social growth can be an aspect of growth marketing, but it just depends on the business. So some businesses, social growth is a lever. Like one of the companies I worked at, Untitled Grief, like I grew their account extremely fast, extremely quickly on Instagram. I think they're at 500,000 followers on Instagram now. But other companies, it just wasn't a factor. We would do SEO or paid ads. I would tweak landing pages and adjust the product and send more emails and send different emails. And so it was kind of like, you have to be a jack of all trades and just figure out where the bottleneck is for growth in the business and focus on that. So yeah, I've kind of had a history with social growth for a long time. I had a philosophy account before I started the social growth one on TikTok. I started like a comedy one very briefly. I was not good at it. I'm sure someone can find those videos. They're pretty embarrassing, but I'm happy to leave them up. Yeah, I've started like things here and there. At one point on YouTube, I started a running account that flopped. I started a cooking account that flopped. I only did 2 or 3 videos and then would give up. Yeah, so I've tried it along the way for sure. And I was always late to the party. I was late to YouTube, late to Instagram, and late to TikTok. Like I heard Gary Vee and people like that talking about it in 2020, maybe even 2019, and I was like, whatever. But I'd seen so many opportunities come and go and I was regretful that I didn't take them when they came. That in 2022, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually give this a go. And it also coincided with the startup I was working at kind of shrinking in size, cutting everyone's hours by 50%. So I had a lot more free time. So I was like, let me actually try this. I was doing that, and then I was also looking for a job on the side. And one of the interviews I had was with a recruiter. He'd been a recruiter for 20 years, and then he was like creating some startup similar to WeWork, and we're on the interview, we're having a good chat, laughing, but we're also like, kind of butting heads about some certain things. Like he's like, oh, I'm going to do this and do that. And I'm like, why would you do that? And he, at the end of the thing, he's like, hey, I'd love you to come work for me, but I've only said this 3 times in my career as a recruiter, and I've recruited thousands and thousands of people. You're not meant to work for other people. Like, go start your own thing. And I've only said, you're the 3rd person I've said that to in 20 years. You need to start your own thing. Like, you're not meant to be an employee. And I was like, and I kind of brushed it off. And then days and weeks after the call, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So then it sort of switched into like, I'm going all in. And then I switched from the philosophy channel to this marketing channel. I put like a challenge up on LinkedIn being like, I'm going to hit 10K in the next 30 days on TikTok on this new channel, or I'll give everyone who comments on this 50 quid or something like that. And all my money was in the stock market at the time. So that was extremely stressful. And the stock market was doing terrible. So I couldn't take it out of the stock market. I had no money anywhere else. So it was extremely stressful. But yeah, that's kind of how I got my start. Yeah.
Amazing. And so you mentioned like trying and starting multiple channels. So how important is it to like pick a niche and focus on one sort of topic and not just post, like why not have the philosophy page with the cooking page, with your social growth page? Why is it important to have a niche?
Well, different people have different takes on this. What I would say is that you need to be a personality if you are to win without a niche. Like, you have to be the niche. And most people are not that. And I am not that. I hope one day I can become that, but it's not naturally my thing. I'm not like the biggest presence. Therefore, I need to be a bit more strategic. And one aspect of business, personal development, social growth, like all of these things that I think people miss is knowing thyself. Like, you got to be real with yourself. Like, I am completely okay to say Logan Paul is much more of a character than me and his brother. What's his brother's name? I can't remember.
Jake, I think.
Jake Paul. Like, they just have it, right? And so they don't need a niche. They can talk about whatever they want, and it's going to draw you in. So, and I feel like I saw a video recently from Gary Vee kind of correcting and saying like, okay, yeah, like not everyone can be the niche. Also, it's interesting that a lot of the people that say you don't need a niche tend to have like overarching themes, like an umbrella that contains all the things they speak about. So he has a niche, I would say. And it's still strategic. I think what a lot of people miss is they just start posting random stuff. There's no connection. and it's like one person follows you because you hunt alligators, and then the next one follows you because you work at an orphanage or whatever, and it's like it's really hard to find people that want to see both things. And the only way they want to see both things is when you become the connector, and that just requires a big personality. So for most people, I think that doesn't work. Also, in terms of monetization, it just definitely doesn't work. Like, let's just take sponsorships. As a sponsor, you want a high certainty that the dollars you're putting into the sponsorship are going to be returned twofold, threefold, tenfold, whatever. I will have higher certainty as a sponsor, as a brand, that the money I put into a creator is going to pay dividends if all they talk about is how to like grow plants, and I'm a plant app. Like their audience and my audience are the exact same. So all they have to do is get the views, and then I'm going to get the customers. But if I talk about how to grow plants 1 in 10 videos, and then the rest are like belly dancing, coffee, barista stuff, bodybuilding, how to do MMA, and it's like all over the place. Like, I don't know who your audience is, and you probably have 10 different audiences or more all within the same account. So the views are less meaningful. Like, you might get 10K views or 100K views on the video, but not all of those will be from the target market. In fact, a large portion won't be. So doesn't make sense from that perspective. And then if you're trying to sell a service or a product, it also doesn't make sense, because people don't want to buy from you if you're trying to sell your plant app and you're talking about all these other things. How does it relate? And all you have to do is look at what a brand does, like big brands, like how do they market stuff? They don't go off and talk about things unrelated to the brand. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. Now, I will say that, and I'll also say that social growth is much quicker at the start when you focus on a thing, right? Just focus on one thing and nail it, and then you can broaden out from there. And that's what I'm starting to do now, right? Like, social growth, most social growth people cap out at around 200K followers. And there is a limit to how many people care about this stuff. Like, especially if you factor in that not everyone speaks English or speaks it fluently. They're probably looking for creators in their own language. And so English speaking people or viewers wanting social growth content is definitely capped. So therefore, at some point, you do need to broaden the niche or the things that you speak about, and then you can do that. But it has to be strategic. So for me, like, now you'll see, I try and talk a lot more about like the ups and the downs of growing a business, challenges I'm going through, like the ins and outs of my community and that kind of thing. I'm talking about like how I did a talk at Red Bull and I was like shit scared, and then that made me do improv. Just like being more vulnerable, being more human, then talking more about like the mindset, the philosophy, marketing, advertising. So you can see I'm broadening, but I always try and connect it in some way to what I'm trying to sell. But for sure, like me being more vulnerable or talking about the mindset or whatever else, like allows me to connect to wider audiences whilst also connecting more deeply with the audience I already have, right? Like, someone is actually more likely to work with me if I speak vulnerably about my strengths, my weaknesses, the business's strengths and weaknesses, the ups and downs. If I talk about my family, although I don't want to do that, but if I did, all of these things build trust and connection and affiliation, and they're all good things if they come from that strategic place. What I often find with beginner creators is they use a lack of strategy as a shield against actually being good, right? Because if you have no strategy and you are the niche, then no one can tell you like you're being ineffective. You know, you're like, this
Yeah.
video is not a good video. It's like, oh, I'm the niche, bro. I'm just expressing myself and that's going to work because Gary Vee said it. It's like, no, it's not working because it's not good. So when you narrow down to a niche, you kind of strip yourself bare and you're like, it's either good or it's not. But when you're like
Yeah.
talking about this and talking about that, and you're not thinking through the ideas and how they relate to the strategy in general, then it's not a good approach. Now, obviously, everyone's approach is different. Like that guy I spoke about before, who like was growing super fast, plateaued, had a bit of mental breakdown, and then like skyrocketed again. He's going for broke. He's like going Mr. Beast style. So he talks about stuff he wants to talk about. His niche is like not endless, but it's definitely broader than say mine. Like, but he has the natural, like the essence that will allow him to get there. And I know like if he stays on the course, he will get to those sorts of levels. Most people are not like that. So I don't think most people should do that, because having more followers is great in a business like mine. But if you're in the middle and you're like a creator like him talking about random stuff, and there's no niche for you, and you don't get to Mr. Beast's level, or, you know, that like bigger creator level, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to make big money. Maybe you don't want to, but if you want to make good money, if you want like really great sponsorships, like all of that stuff, you have to break through that ceiling. It's kind of like a 0 to 1 thing in that particular, like if you have that strategy. So in all other instances, I try and make content strategically, and I think other people should too. And so your niche can be very, very tight, or it can be broader, but you should have some sort of connecting through line to all the different pieces of content, and know like, I'm doing this because of this, not just like, oh, I'm just doing it. I think that like you wouldn't do that if you're a business or a brand, so you shouldn't do it with a personal account either.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing I latched on there from your answer was your Red Bull talk that you said you were shitting yourself, which I'm sure a lot of people appreciated your vulnerability, but at the same time may have surprised some people, because you're talking to camera and speaking about this stuff literally daily. And so I'm curious, how have you found the improv side of it? Because I'm also curious and interested in improv, and I can see how it can be really helpful. But for someone like you, who seems like they're at a level above most people, has that been helpful to you?
Well, so I'm only 3 weeks in, so you can only get so good at something in 3 weeks. This is something a lot of content creators need to learn as well. Like they'll get really frustrated if they aren't at like 1 million followers in 3 weeks. Like things take time. So I would say I'm learning things technically. Like I'm like, oh, this is a thing, you know, like oh, we don't actually want to be the funniest person, we want to build the scene, is something I'm learning. Or like oh, instead of trying to be funny and then that leading to you being stressed and not funny, if you actually just try and say the most ordinary thing, it leads to funniness and you no longer have the stress. Those kinds of realizations are great and applicable broadly, right? Like if instead of trying to impress you right now, I just am authentic and just say, and actually reduce the bar and just say, I'm just going to say the most average thing possible, then I think in terms of presence and authenticity and all of that stuff, you massively raise the bar without stressing yourself out. And I think that's a big issue I've had, is that I'll like overthink things. That's the reason I wanted to do improv rather than public speaking, was that with a lot of public speaking training, you get to prep. And that was the issue that was screwing me over with the Red Bull thing, was I was constantly like, okay, I need to say this particular word because it's the best word in this moment to say. And then like when I was practicing with my partner, if I said a different word, I'd just like choke, because it's like, that's not the right word. She's like, there's other words. Like, you don't need that word. Trust yourself. And the truth is, I didn't trust myself. I don't trust myself to say the right thing in the right moment. And so I'm hoping that improv gives me that looseness of like, I trust myself. Things will happen to me that I cannot control, but I trust myself and have confidence in myself that I will be able to handle these things, adjust, respond, all of that stuff. So yeah, I've been learning a lot of stuff technically that's making me think a lot, but I don't think it's gone into the subconscious. Like, I don't think I'm applying it right now. I don't think I'll be applying it day to day, but I'm hooked. Like, I will be doing improv comedy for years to come. Like, I want to build the Harvard of social growth within the business. Externally, I want to create the most entertaining, story-driven, educational content that there is on social growth, and probably will branch out into marketing and the psychology of business and these kinds of things, and behavioral psychology and these buyer psychology, these sorts of things. And in order to do that, I have to get better. And I think one of the biggest things holding me back right now is like, how do I show up on camera? How able am I to act? Which is, I'm going to be doing acting stuff after this too. But also, how able am I to improvise? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff around that I'm going to be investing in order to level up the channel and make it the best it can be. But yeah, come back to me in 2 years and I'll let you know the impact it's had. But one of the reasons as well that I've wanted to do this for a while is that, but I needed that like impetus from pain, of like, oh, that didn't go as well as I wanted. That's never going to happen again. But I've been wanting to do it for years, because I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed a bunch of really, really, really successful people saying, oh yeah, I've done improv. I recommend improv. And I know Steve Jobs recommends improv and did improv. And a lot of the people that I respect the most that are very big business owners all seem to, not all of them, but many of them seem to have mentioned improv as a tool that they've used in the past. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed too. I've heard it come up again and again, and my girlfriend has said that sometimes on this podcast I lack a bit of charisma, which I appreciate her brutal honesty. But I feel like improv is a way to do that too. There's so many other things you can learn from it, but I think that'll help me in that aspect too. So yeah, I think this is a sign for me to join an improv school. Yeah, I will. And do you feel like pressure at all to keep growing, or else you may lose credibility? Is it like a hedonic treadmill of sorts?
Well, yeah, like I think people don't understand that, especially when your account's called Viral Video Club. I massively regret that name, because it's like, okay, now show me your receipts, so and I know you had the Stanley from the Attention Seekers on before, and we're friendly, we've spoken a few times, good guy. We've spoken about this, like how his thing's called the Attention Seekers, which is adjacent. Like, you probably need views some of the time for sure, like in order to be called the Attention Seekers, but you don't need that, like there's not the pressure of Viral Video Club. So I'm regretful of the name, but it is what it is for now. But yeah, if you're in social growth and you're not growing socially, you can feel like a fraud. And yet, no business ever grows at the same tick forever, right? Like, Microsoft plateaued for something like 20 years, and they had billions of dollars to invest, the smartest people in the world, incredible technology, incredible infrastructure, and they plateaued for 20 years. Tesla was not the company it is now. It wasn't, it was like stagnant for many years. Meta, like many of these big businesses that everyone respects, went through massive plateaus. it's a part of business, and it's a part of social growth. Like, platforms change, buyer like sentiment change, or not buyer, viewer sentiment changes and preferences. And especially on TikTok, these changes happen so rapidly that there will come times where what you're doing no longer works, and now you have to find the next thing. And so it is part of the process, but people don't see it that way. It's like they will just go, "Oh, you're shit," because people don't take the time to think through it. So I do feel that pressure for sure. Someone on one of my boot camps was like, "How are you able to experiment so widely? Like, even outside of your niche, I feel like that would be hard." She said, I would find that hard, like, to experiment so much, because I'd be worried about getting less views. You're in social growth, and you know that experimenting a lot will lead to some of the videos not performing, and yet you still do it. How do you do it? And I think that comes from the background of growth marketing and startups, where, like, ultimately, even though emotionally up here, like, I might be finding it hard and going, "Oh, that's 3 videos in a row that haven't performed." My fundamental first principle thinking is that we have to experiment, we have to test in order to continue to grow, and that we're not looking for a hit every time. We're looking for growth overall. And the more we are able to manage our emotions and not be reactive to negative results and failures, the more we can experiment, and the more we experiment, the faster we grow. The second piece there is that I could just do, like, steal these viral hooks, like, again and again and again, and I'd hit millions of followers, guaranteed. Those videos get like millions of views for me on Instagram. So, and they take 3 minutes to make. The problem with content like that is it doesn't teach me anything, right? It's and it's kind of low quality content. Like, it's lowest common denominator content. So when I make content like that, I don't learn anything. Therefore, I can't teach anything. And that there's that, like, thought experiment of, would you rather be known as a good lover but be a terrible lover, or be a terrible lover, no, or be an incredible lover but be known as a terrible lover? And I would choose the latter. Like, I think, I can't remember. I'd rather, like, be good rather than be perceived as good. And in order to do that, and this Red Bull said this to me too, they're like, we like that you try so many different types of content, and that you have skin in the game, right? I'm not like, it's very easy to tell other people how to socially grow, but unless you're going through those ups and downs too, it's hard for people to resonate with you. Like, in the same way that a therapist who has had a lot of trauma in their life and managed to overcome it and has a story to tell, I think will have better therapeutic outcomes for their patients than someone who's, like, from privilege, always had a privileged life, and things were always easy for them. So I try and actually view it from the perspective of the downs actually help me connect better with other people, because even when I'm having a down period, there's someone out there who's been posting for 5 months and getting 300 views and has 200 followers. I've had comments from people saying, I've posted 3 times a day for 2 years, I have 100 followers. Like, so I'm better able to access that aspect of myself and, like, feel the emotions they're feeling. That, therefore, I become a better coach, a better educator, and I'm staying on top of what's actually working right now. Like, also, things like steal these viral hooks, it's a hack, right? Like, it's like, okay, this is a format that works, I can repeat it. But if I want to be a better educator publicly, like in the videos, and I want to be a better storyteller, which are the two things I want to do, become better at educating and storytelling, and they're very intertwined because we remember stories more than any fact, then I have to tell stories, and I have to get better at telling stories and trying different stories and not relying on the same exact framework all the time. So I'm constantly testing and experimenting with frameworks and strategies and tweaking different things. And it might seem like there's no thinking or strategy behind some of it. Like, why did he switch from this to this? Why didn't he just stay with the thing that's working? But all of it informs my ability to be a better coach, educator for the people I work with. So, but yeah, long answer short, it's really fucking hard. Like, to be in the niche I'm in and have things not working. But also, last thing I'll say on this is diversification. So I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn a little bit, I'm on Threads now, and I'm on YouTube. Instagram's my primary platform, but usually when one platform's not working, another one is doing okay. So that kind of like gives you some peace of mind. So that's been helpful too. But the mindset game, you have to continually strengthen your mind, because in the past, when shit wasn't working, I'd get desperate, and desperate content does not perform. Like, content that performs is when you're coming from a place of joy, playfulness, creativity, curiosity, hunger, ambition, like excitement, not from like a place of like, give me the views, like I deserve the views. No, you don't deserve the views. And I've definitely gone into that hole before. So yeah, you need to find a way to keep yourself strong.
Yeah, I think that approach can be applied to all aspects of life, really. But I'd also like to get a better understanding, just to put into perspective, like, what did it take for you to grow your profiles at the beginning? Like, how many hours were you putting in? What approach did you take?
I was posting 3 times a day on TikTok. I was just doing TikTok at the start. And obviously I had this challenge where I would lose a significant amount of money and face if I didn't grow to 10,000 followers in 30 days. So there was a hunger to spend a lot of time on this. But also at the time, I didn't know editing. I wasn't script writing. It was all from the top of the noggin. So the hardest bit at the time was just like, okay, what's the idea? What am I going to talk about next? And so I'd say it was less time than you might imagine. Like, I would say maybe, depending on the day, like an hour to 3 hours a day. I spend way more time on content and each individual piece of content now than I did back then. And I think that's the way it should go. Like, you should invest more into each piece when you have the knowledge to know where that time should be allocated, right? Like, when you don't know what you're doing, just see whether the idea works, and then you can start layering on additional things. Yeah, and then I managed to hit 30K in those 30 days, like right toward the end. I found one particular format that was working for me, and then I just started repeating that format, and then that just really took me over the edge on one particular video. And that's probably the fastest way to grow, is to like put out a shit ton of content, and then when you stumble across something that works, go all in for a period. And if you're not trying to do what I'm doing, you would go all in, really go all in into one format and just grow the hell out of it. It's the easiest way to do it. Even Mr. Beast did it with the challenge stuff. Like, basically one format blew him up, and he just kept rinsing it. And, slightly different, but it's basically the same. So that's kind of how I would do it if I was to start again and in a different niche. Find that one format.
And before this all started, you were homeless at one point. Is that correct? Could you elaborate on that, how that happened and how you got out of that situation?
How it happened? Well, I had undiagnosed ADHD. That definitely played a massive part. Like, I didn't know thyself, and so I really, really struggled. I'd wanted to be a musician, and then I got like a lot of vocal damage and had to stop doing that. And like, music was my life. Like, I was the sort of person you'd look at and go, I hate that man. But I'd like walk down the street with my guitar playing like, woo, you know. I actually got hit by a car once while
What?
playing ukulele and crossing the street. An old man like uh, ran a red light. He was like very old and just like proper smashed into me. And I think the people around me were like, yes. Um, they didn't say that, but I could imagine like if you're the sort of young, if you see a young man just like playing music while he's walking, like, you know, you'd probably want him to get hit by a car. So, um, and I'd play it like in coffee shops and everywhere I went. In the tube, I loved music. And so when that was taken away from me, I I kind of had a very slow downfall, you know, like it wasn't immediate, but like I couldn't find my place in society. Also, I'm a bit of a hippie. Like, I wouldn't say I'm a socialist, but definitely at the time I started like feeling very disenchanted with the way society was run and how how much money drives society. And I read a book called Saved, which is an incredible book, but I read it at the wrong time, and so it kind of broke me. I was like, it basically pulls apart the story of money and how like it actually distances us in terms of like connection and relationships. Before we would have like you would have had to exchange uh, some time or something in order to get another thing. So like if your friend wanted an axe and you had an axe, you'd give him the axe and now he would owe you. And that owing is a good thing because now when you need something, they will have to repay the debt. And that's actually a good thing. And it's how relationships build. Now it's like, oh, here's the money, you know, I don't owe you nothing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I kind of went down that rabbit hole and was like, oh, money's worthless and I don't want to get a corporate job. And not that I'd ever had a corporate job. I just imagined that they were like life sucking. So yeah, I kind of just, I worked in a Uniqlo for a while and then uh, started my own business and that kind of failed. And it failed because I didn't really do anything and I was just quite lazy. And then eventually I was like unemployed, living with my ex, and decided to break up with her, knowing that that would then mean because I mean it was like no longer working, and I would only be staying with her in order to have the house, and I thought that was unfair. So we broke up. I moved out. I was homeless. I had no savings. Oh no, I had like £100. Um, and then yeah, I was homeless for about 6 months. Um, and then I sent an email to my parents. Were very like, "Hey, you've kind of brought this on yourself, uh, and so you have to get yourself out of it." Which is why I didn't just go home immediately. But after 6 months, I was like, I sent an email to my mum and I said, "Hey, look, I'm broken. Like, I'm in a dangerous place right now, because like I don't. What's the point in going on?" Kind of thing. And I was like, either like I really need you to just let me come home. So then she let me come home. I ran a marathon with no training to prove my dad wrong. It's kind of like a common theme between us of him. He will often be like, "Oh, you cannot achieve this or that," like very quickly. You know, if you Byron said to my dad like, "Hey, I want to one day be able to run a 5K in under 20 minutes," he'll go, "No one's ever done that. It's like, impossible." That kind of like, and it just infuriates me. So the next morning I went out at 5 a.m. with no food in my system. It was the hottest day of the year. I had no sunscreen, no water, no food, and I ran the marathon. And then that kind of finally gave me a bit of like, oh, I can do hard shit, because all those years of stumbling had really like just destroyed my self-esteem. And so all I needed was something like that. It wasn't planned, like it wasn't orchestrated. it just happened that way, and it gave me a vote of confidence. And then, I think the next month I was working at GoDaddy, and then it kind of all uh, got better after that. But yeah, I just needed one win in order to right the ship.
That's amazing. What a great story. But to go from homelessness to earning what you are now in a relatively short period, like that must be quite a surreal feeling.
Yeah, it is. It makes it hard to enjoy it. Like, you become like a traumatized squirrel who's like, one winter they forgot to bury the nuts, and now and they were starving
Yeah.
one winter, and so now they're like, like, it's pathological is what I'm trying to say. Is like, now they're burying 10,000 nuts per year, and like their friends and family never see them. It's like that. So um it makes it very hard to switch off, and it makes it very hard to enjoy the fruits of your labor, because you're like, oh, maybe it'll be gone tomorrow. So I've noticed that the goalpost keeps moving. Like, I'm not monetarily driven. Like, I don't care for fancy things. Like, it's fine if people do, but I don't need like some huge house or fancy car, or I don't even need to travel that much. Like, my partner probably would love to travel much, but I'm happy like in my little house, like just making content and that kind of thing. But so I'm not driven toward like, I need more money. I'm driven away from, can never be homeless again. And now that I'm building a family, I cannot allow that to happen to them either. Like, and because I have been there, when people say, "Oh, don't worry, that stuff doesn't happen," like, I know it does, and it doesn't just happen to me. It happens to, like, look at the homelessness problem we have in the UK. Like, it happens. So uh, I don't have that same confidence that gives ease to other people of like, hey, like, it's all gonna turn out okay. And sometimes it doesn't turn out okay. So like, you need to really fucking prep for that stuff. So um, it's definitely a part of my success is that failure is it gives me a hunger that a lot of people don't have. And it's also like, it's a real trauma, like, it's a trauma response to something really fucking bad happening in my life for like a relatively extended period of time. So it's like, yeah, but like, I love what I do, and it's like, I'm working very hard on something that I really, really, truly enjoy. I love teaching people, and I love creating content. But I would love to have a little more peace around the money piece of like, hey, things are good. But yeah, honestly, I don't know if I see very many very successful business owners who don't have some of that, like, something a little broken. So it is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. And one thing I really appreciate about you is your transparency. I mean, not only in your content, but even in this conversation, it's very evident. So what made you decide to be completely transparent?
I don't think it's like a decision to, I think the decision would be to not be transparent, uh, because I want to be myself, and like, I don't like lying. I don't like giving half truths. Um, yeah, I mean, one thing that I find, uh, or I see a lot on social media, LinkedIn is a really bad one for this, is like, people get stuck in this loop of like only talking about when stuff's going well, um, even when, even though stuff behind the surface is probably often going wrong. And when you get stuck in that loop, then it's very hard to break out of it with the help of others, right? You can't ask for help because you're always growing, everything's always perfect, and your strategies always work. And I think if you can build in some consistency in terms of like, hey, this went well, that didn't go well, then people are less likely to attack you when stuff's going wrong and actually help you. And also, just from like a selfish perspective of thinking through what my younger self would have liked, is I would have liked more people, more business owners, more people creating content to show that vulnerability, because it makes you go mad, like when people are like, oh yeah, like life is easy, business is easy, I'm always growing, I've never not grown, I don't know why people struggle, like when people say that, then there's people listening that are like, oh, I'm broken then, because like I do find it hard. um and then there's just a piece of like, uh I want to l- live transparently and authentically, and it's just a manifestation of that. Like I actually find it hard to filter, and so when I was younger I had no filter. I've had to develop a filter. For instance, um like a little bit ago, my it, someone who works on my team sent an email without my approval, and it caused like some money to be lost for the company. And she was like, you should talk about this publicly. uh, and I wanted to, but also there's like a perception thing of like, okay, if I talk about how a bunch of people left the community because of this accidental email, maybe it makes other people want to follow suit, or people externally think like, it's not that good of a community. So like, I did end up speaking about it, but there is that resistance of like, uh, perception does matter. And so I understand why people get stuck in that loop of like, hey, everything is always good in my business, you should work with me because everything's good with me. Because I do think that in the short term, transparency, vulnerability, honesty can hurt you. Uh, but and so that's really hard. And I have felt those moments of like, hey, don't say that because someone's gonna think less of you. Like even the Red Bull thing, I really hesitated before I put the Red Bull thing out, because I was like, maybe everyone at Red Bull loved it, and now that they know I was shit scared, they're gonna hate it, because perception can change. Uh, and then other people who were like, oh, he did Red Bull, are gonna be like, oh, he did Red Bull, but it was really shit, so I won't, get him to speak at my event. So there's all these thoughts running through my mind, and that's true. I actually think I can lose significant business by being honest. I think that's actually going to happen. But I'm playing the long game, which is that if people know that I will say the good and say the bad, then they can trust me. And trust is extremely hard to earn and uh, to gain. And it happens slowly. It happens over time. And I think that is worth an insane amount. Additionally, I think like, because I came from music and like a more creative sort of loose, free path, and I've been homeless and I've had all these things happen to me. Like a lot of the protocols, the standard protocols of business and like how people interact in like a professional setting, don't make sense to me. And so yeah, like I think a lot of business, a lot of being professional, even a lot of being an adult, is about pretending. Like people are pretending constantly, pretending to be brave, pretending to have information they don't have, pretending to have experience or skill that they don't have, uh, pretending to have it together, pretending that they're not a nutter, like just pretending. Um, and we do this in a professional setting, and we do it in life as well, right? Like, we pretend that we don't care when our friend doesn't show up for a thing because we're worried it'll seem weak. We pretend that we don't want someone to text us back. Like, if we're dating, we're scared to say, I like you.
Yeah.
We're constantly acting. And I mean, this is why I love improv, is because you just have to, it's weird that like, even though you are intentionally acting in improv, first you have to remove all of the thoughts and the judgments that you have within yourself of like, hey, this is stupid, because they'll get you to play like games that a child would play. And so I hear in myself when we're playing these games like, hey, like, you need to go home and do business because this is for children. Like, this is stupid. You're an adult. You shouldn't be here. And that's just all fear, right? And so fundamentally, like, I'm a very fearful person, and so I have to make a lot more effort in order to tackle my fears than the average person does. That's true. You can ask my partner. We were speaking about it last night. Like, uh, I just do. I have a lot more fear to deal with than other people, and I want to deal with it. Like, I don't want to pretend. Like, I used to say, like, oh, I'm addicted to my phone, and people would say, oh, I'm not, and then I'd say, let me see your screen time, and theirs would be twice mine. So at least I have awareness that, like, shit's not working. Like,
Yeah.
and so what I've realized over time, like when I first got into business and being a professional, you think like everyone has their shit together, and then when you are public about these things, hey, I was scared about this, I failed at that, usually not publicly, but privately, people will reach out who seem to have it all together and go, hey man, and like, I had the same thing. Like, I'm scared of this. I'm terrified of that. I did a bad job here. I did a bad. People that like publicly are presenting as having it all together, and I think actually that's extremely stressful. Like, uh, it's a different kind of stress. Like, the stress of performing constantly is a different stress to shedding all of the shit and the gunk that makes you feel like you need to perform. But I think ultimately, this is a long-term game for me, professionally and personally, to just be what I am and not need to like add or try and subtract or like do anything to myself other than be the best version of myself. And yeah, so I think that's what allows me to be vulnerable, is I see that like it's the only way to internal peace. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you say you are very fearful, because from the outside looking in, like, you're doing something, like you're taking action, whereas a lot of people let that fear hold them back and they don't take action. And there's also, like you touched on, so many people out there pretending like they know what they do, selling courses when they don't even know what they're doing. And I can imagine that creates that different type of fear that you touched on, where it's like in the background you feel like a charlatan. Well, you kind of are a charlatan, and you constantly fearful of someone like finding out or exposing you. But I'm interested because part of that like pretending to be something you're not, and part of these like viral series that works, and you've done a few of these where it's like $10,000 in a month, or now you're doing another 100K series. I'm curious what your view is on these kind of series, and also how have they helped you in terms of motivation and holding you accountable?
Challenges, whether they're on social media or just with your peers, are extremely helpful in getting you to break through, because the one of the easiest ways to get yourself to do something that you find painful and that you're resisting doing is to create more pain in the opposite direction. Like if I said, hey, gun to your head or your family's head, build a business that's worth 100K in the next 30 days or it's over, you would do it. You just would.
Yeah.
And so there are elements and aspects to ourselves that are not unlocked, in the same way that like a man or a woman walking around is accessing maybe 10% of their strength, right? When their child is under a car, they access the rest of it. And the reason is because their mind is saying it's unsafe to access the rest. And in terms of the physicality of the human body, that's true, right? Like tendon strength, joint strength, these things are not the same as like muscular strength. And so you can hurt yourself accessing all the strength that you have without the proper training. So that makes sense physically. Mentally, a lot of these blockades happen because of like childhood trauma, or like stories from your parents, or just your experiences through life that block you. And it's all about like the stories that drive you in your life. They will stop you from accessing things that you have access to. So like you could build $100,000 business this month. I could, and this is not to say just because I'm maybe a little further along, if I was not blocked, I could build $1 million business this month. Like, but I haven't done that. You know, like I don't make $1 million a month because all of the shit, all of the gunk is in the way. Now, obviously, there's a different question around how long a business and how sustainable a business we would build if we were rushing that process. So that's not the point. I'm just saying that you have access to things that you are not accessing because of the shit in your mind. That's the point. Yeah. So basically, challenges for me are like kind of a hack to get you past those blockades, right? And to access elements of yourself that are already there so that you can see them and go, okay, cool, like that story was wrong. And you can overcome these stories in other ways by like looking at the story, like what's your money story? Why, like, do you believe that you deserve, obviously deserve is a very charged word, but do you think that you having $1 million business, like, you know, brings in $1 million in revenue per year, how does that make you feel? Do you really believe that you deserve that? And if you really sit with it and you're really honest, like maybe you don't think that. And you can also see it in your actions. Like I was sabotaging myself constantly. So when I did the $100,000 challenge, even with all that pain of like, I'm talking about social growth, and implied in social growth is like business growth, right? And so if I'm saying I'm going to make $100,000 in a month with social growth, and then I do not do that, it looks really bad for me and my business long term. So I had a lot of public pressure, and yeah, I was still sabotaging, and I didn't even know it the whole way. You know, I had a bunch of people reached out and were helping me because they saw like that I was being vulnerable and this is the unsung hero of vulnerability, is like people want to help you when you are fully yourself and fully honest and showing the hardship too. So I'd say over 100 people, like sales coaches, mindset coaches, different people reached out like, I'll help you for free. And I was probably being coached by 15 people, like,
Amazing.
So, and they were telling me stuff, I just wasn't doing it until like the last week. Like I was supposed to send, I think, an email every day, and then like ramping up to 2 a day toward the end of the month. It's like a 30-day launch sequence. You know, 5, 10, 20 stories per day. I wasn't sending any stories. I didn't send any emails. The whole month I sent 2 emails instead of like, I think 40 or 50 I was supposed to send. Stories I didn't really start doing until the end. Sales videos, I was supposed to do a sales video every day. I did 2 sales videos in total. And so it wasn't until the end where I was like, why haven't I done any of the stuff I was supposed to do? You know, and I was fucking working. I was like working sometimes 16 hours a day, and I did nothing else. I didn't exercise. I was just working all day, every day, exhausting emotionally, physically, everything. But I was working on all the wrong things, you know. So some people, when there's a blockade, maybe they just procrastinate. They're like, go watch TV or whatever. I was deep in all sorts of the wrong work, you know, like, so I could tell myself, hey man, you're working so hard, like it's not your fault it's not working. But it was my fault because my subconscious was sabotaging me and getting me to focus on the wrong things. And as soon as I started, it was like 3-4 days of focusing on the right things, and I hit the goal. Like, so that's the power of like when you move the blockade. And the only way I was able to move it was when I was able to identify it. So the cycle was continuing. The story was getting me to focus on the wrong things. and leading me very, very close to failure. And it wasn't until I said, hey, what's going on? Like, what story am I telling myself? Okay, cool. Like, I actually am scared of making 100K in a month. That's really weird. I wouldn't have known that. Like, if you'd asked me, yeah, man, I should be making bank, you know? And then, but when it comes down to it, that's actually not what I was like. So I had to uncover that and address it, like challenge it. Like, why do I think this? And what's a better story to tell myself? And then all day, every day, as much as I could, repeating that story to myself. But yeah, so these challenges just that allow enough pressure so that you can change your mindset and your stories rapidly, rather than taking a long time for them to change. So they're really good in that way. I've always achieved the goal when I've no, there was one challenge that I failed on, but that was because it was too long. It was like, over the next 12 months, I'm going to do XYZ. And then after 3 weeks in, I was like, I'm bored of this. So
yeah,
it was a hard challenge as well, but like, it's that momentum and the compounding effect, and that, like, for 30 days, let's go all in. The one downside is one, you have to make sure that it's a goal that is actually achievable for you. So like, where I was in my business and the size of audience I'd grown, 100K was a really, really big leap up from where I was at, and was extremely hard. And yet it made sense. Like, it was possible. People with much smaller audiences had made more. So like, someone with no audience and no skill going, I'm going to make 100K this month, I don't think that makes sense. Maybe some other people would argue different, but I think, like, you have to know thyself and know where you're starting from. And then so like, when I did the TikTok one, I said 10K. I hit 30K, but I felt like 10K, seeing what other people had been able to do, was achievable, and that I could actually had control over the volume. So like, if I was not on path, I could go from 3 videos per day to 5 to 6 to 7. Like, there was things I could control that could get me there if I was away. Some people would say, I'm going to get 1 million in a month. It's like, okay, you've already failed. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, at least for me, when I'm done with these challenges, I'm completely depleted. And long-term consistency is the game, right? Like, there's probably people out there who, in short bursts, create more content, higher quality content, more insightful content, whatever, and then just drop off. Like, I make content every week, rain or shine, and being good consistently is better than being great inconsistently. And so you need to find a way, I think, and I've only learned this recently, to be able to, like, take that energy and maintain it. So like, after the 30-day growth challenge, like the TikTok trying to hit 10K followers, I didn't post for maybe 4 months. I learned from that. So the next time when I did the 100K thing, I just kept posting. In fact, I posted more, and I had a boot camp to run. So, but you have to find a way to manage your energy and to understand that, because there's no point in doing it and then crashing and being burnt out for 4 months or 6 months, or never coming back to it at all. Like, so you want to use them, and you want to use them very sporadically and purposefully to, like, get you that start, because 0 to 1 is the hardest thing. So if you can get help with that, then it's great. So this current challenge I'm on, the 100K per month, just from the community product. So trying to 10x the community. And the other products and services, they'll be add-on, but they won't be included in this challenge. The reason I'm doing that, but there's no time limit. And that's because I can't, currently I know I cannot handle a 30-day challenge like that. And it's a community. So like, community doesn't function like that. It would break the community if I bring on too many people too soon. So there's a few reasons why it's not a challenge. Well, it's a challenge, but it's not like a time boxed challenge, even though those are way more engaging for the audience. Like, it's intentionally slow, and the content doesn't even have to be good. And it's just about being vulnerable and documenting the process. And also there's a bit of strategy there in terms of it's on a secondary channel that allows me to talk more deeply about the community,
Yeah.
and build connections so people want to come on board.
Amazing. Well, I'm just conscious of time, and we've been speaking for ages, and we could carry on for hours. But before I end every conversation, I normally ask my guests if they have a question for me.
What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you?
Most embarrassing thing? Oh, that's a really tough question. Like long-term embarrassment for me, it's not really a thing. And I'm trying to think of when I was last embarrassed publicly.
Doesn't have to be publicly, just embarrassed. But if embarrassment isn't a thing for you, then maybe what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
The hardest thing I've ever done. That's also an interesting question, because things are hard when you do them, and then when you look back, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. So I'd say a few things would be just packing up and moving to Hong Kong like 7 years ago. I did it alone, not much planning, but I just felt like it was the right thing to do. And then another one, which is quite tough, which is moving back from Hong Kong to the UK and like completely changing careers and like reinventing myself. Those were two pretty hard things in the moment, very stressful times, and I had to be there for my partner. We're both looking for jobs when we didn't have ones lined up. So yeah, that was really hard in the moment, but looking back, I'm really into stoicism and mindset and that type of stuff. So I was really positive during it, but it was a hard time in my life. But looking back, it's like, it's just a blimp in the whole process.
Nice.
So yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today, Yasin. I really appreciate you taking the time. And if people want to find out more about you and Viral Video Club, where can they do so?
Viralvideo.club, or check out my socials, and you can find all the links there. At viralvideo.club on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.